Welcome to the Dynasty Evaluation Show. It's Happy Hump Day. We got a great show today. Alan Seslowskya talking about Kaleb Johnson, 6 foot, 225-pound running back from the Iowa Hawkeyes. Are we ready for a show today, boys? Because it is on. Alan, somehow, some way, we tricked you to come back on the show again. So, I mean, if nobody didn't get all your intangibles and all the stuff you do in the fantasy football community, tell us everybody where they can find you again, just so they can see your happy face and associate where you're at.
Yeah, well, the reason I came back on, because it's not often, even though I'm still in third place, I have a chance to compete for the best looking guy in the room. But, you know, I mean, that was the big draw. Yeah, I'm over at RotoWire. You can follow me on at Alan Seslowsky. And, you know, we're just posting stuff all the time and we're doing, you know, I don't love fantasy baseball. Do you guys play fantasy baseball at all?
No.
Yeah,
I'm in a league, but it's like a buddy asked me to be in with a bunch of his friends like a couple years ago. So I'm in one, but like 3 people have already dropped this year, and now we're trying to decide if we're actually going to do the draft. Who are we going to add? So I'm in a league of everything, but I just don't pay that much attention. I draft my team, and then I only pick up guys if there's like major injuries and stuff. I try to set my lineup at the beginning of the week and not look at it again if I can help it.
Yeah, the reason I even mention it is because I'm supporting the guys over at RotoWire getting all the baseball content up. So it's crazy. I mean, it's like you do the same things you do for football. 10 outfielders you must draft, and you know all that kind of stuff. But it's just different. You know, I'm glad that we're getting to talk some rookies and football again because recalibrates my brain. I
did it one time for 1 year and it's trying to set the pitchers and the relievers and the this and that, and it's ridiculous. So I said, no, I'm done. I better just do fantasy hockey. And fantasy hockey is a perfect buffer for fantasy football because everything just died, and I can just take your time and set one lineup every day. Sometimes set it a week in advance if you want to. You get to watch the NHL. It's my second favorite sport. I mean, and then it leads right into baseball. Fantasy hockey is the best. If you didn't have not been in fantasy hockey before or haven't joined the league, give it like 2 or 3 years of like kind of hashing out, get to learn the players, learn the scoring system. And then it just it gets you that from like setting 32 lineups to doing one lineup a day. And it's a nice, peaceful transition. It's so nice, man.
Yeah, I used to love hockey back in the 80s. Like grew up in Long Island. So I was like that 1980s Islanders teams. Like that was when I was a little
fisherman, baby.
Yes. So, but actually, and I'll get back on track for a second here. But we used to play this thing called the Super League where we would put we would do the draft, right? There'd be 12 of us. So us 3, 9 others, and every baseball player, football player, and basketball player would be in this draft. So you're literally drafting everyone. Like the first pick could be Kevin Durant. The second pick can be Patrick Mahomes. And you're building a team. So you have to decide, do you want to go all in on one or on the other? It was just a pain in the ass to track.
That's wild. I talked to a couple buddies about playing in a league like that one time, and we never could get it all together. Couldn't find enough guys that were like interested in all the sports to do it. But we had talked about like whether you do individual drafts and then be able to trade cross leagues, like trade a basketball player for a hockey player. That a lot of work, but that would be fun. That would be fun.
Woohoo, Alan is here. Chris Joel Smith checking in again. Alan is here to talk about Kaleb Johnson, which was, I said before the show, I was so happy that he took Kaleb Johnson because this is a situation. I love this dude. I love the Iowa Hawkeyes. I love the stadium. I love everything about Iowa. I love the colors. Just everything about it. So I am so excited for this show, and it's a nice morning. Got some coffee going on. Let's dig into some Kaleb Johnson here. So here we go. Tell me about everything you saw so far about Kaleb Johnson, as far as on film, all the stuff that you saw as far as intangibles, everything you can talk positive about Kaleb Johnson.
Yeah, guys, and you guys watch a lot more film than I do, but this is what I've learned from playing Dynasty football for about 14 years and from playing fantasy football, whatever. I'm going to let the market do the work for me, and meaning ultimately draft capital, right? Like I know it's such a simple way to think about it, but right now, like I've seen some people like you guys mentioned Thor Nystrom. He's pretty bullish on Kaleb, right? I've seen some other people that have him at like 4, but either way, like he's going in the second round. Like it would be a shocker if he went in the third round. And it's like where these guys land, I think is way more important because ultimately what we want to do is we want to draft the right guy for our dynasty team, right? Like, last year I landed on Jonathan Brooks. I was like in the final 4. So I needed a running back. At pick 10 or 11, I draft Jonathan Brooks. It doesn't work out. I'm back in that same spot again. So if Caleb goes to Pittsburgh and he's the Najee replacement, like, you're smashing him at the end there. You don't care about any of that other stuff. But obviously, the things that I do look for, guys, is the pass blocking, which all the stuff I've read is like that's the biggest question mark, right? But it's the biggest question mark for all these guys if they can pass block to get on the field. And the other thing is, I use the number 20 for the receptions. If they're over 20 receptions, which I'm referencing his stats from last year, 22 receptions, like that's good enough where you can at least be a dump off guy in the NFL. So when you and I had this conversation, John McGlynn, you had told me that, like, oh, Caleb, I thought you were anti-Caleb. Did you see anything different there than, hey, this is like a run-of-the-mill, second-round running back, good player, but, like, special? I don't know. I'll just be happy to take him at the end of the first round of my drafts.
No, I mean, he's my running back 3 right now behind Marion Hampton. So the thing is, we'll talk about the negatives later, but as of right now, when I see him, he has the vision and just that shiftiness to get through holes. And I mean, I watch every one of his all 22 tapes on Dynasty Nerds. I love Dynasty Nerds. They had that all 22 film built in there. So I watch every one of his games on Dynasty Nerds, all 22, and just watch. He just finds a way to get the ball and get there fast, find the hole and get there. And he runs upright a little bit, but I mean, that everybody has their own running style. I'm not going to mock him for that. I don't care. He gets yards. If that helps his vision by standing up straight, I don't care. He doesn't fumble that much. So, it's one of those things where watching him run and watching him hit holes, because when there's Iowa's got a great offensive line and he finds the hole and they make a hole for him. But when it's there and he takes advantage of it, man, he is downfield. And I love watching dudes just, it's like watching Saquon Barkley almost in the NFL. But, I'm not comparing him to Saquon. Obviously, that's a generational talent. But watching him just break open these long plays on a consistent basis almost every game, it's a pleasure. That's what a running back's supposed to do. I don't want to see a guy who just puts their head in the back of an offensive lineman's ass and gets 1 or 2 yards of play,
He's not Brian Robinson, right? He's better than Brian Robinson, if that's the Mendoza line, But but just real quick, so who do you comp him to right now? Like the patient stuff that I've saw from him, it reminds me not of the same level of Le'Veon Bell, but you remember how Lev Bell used to glide side to side and then see it and then hit it? He would almost be like uncomfortably patient, waiting for the blocks to develop. That's funny because you said that, because I watched a bunch of Marion Hampton film the last couple of days too. And the thing about Marion Hampton is he jumps up every time there's a snap. If you watch his film, first thing he does, he hops up in the air. He stands straight up. And I mean, it's like he's not. I guess you could say some people are waiting for the play to develop, that kind of stuff. But first thing he does every play when the ball snapped, stands straight up and then starts hitting the hole and then kind of shuffles around. Caleb Johnson just goes bam, like he just goes. There's no stutter step. There's no nothing. He just goes and he finds the hole, and the holes are there for him. So I guess when he goes with an NFL team, and if he needs to go somewhere with a pretty damn good offensive line, because again, before I get too far, I don't want to talk about the negatives yet, but he just goes. He finds the hole right from the get-go, and it's the offense works for him, and he works for the offense. And as far as comparisons go, there's a lot of players. There's not like one guy that looks just like him. And I'm not a big fan of Le'Veon Bell because Le'Veon Bell danced around a lot behind it. He waited for stuff to open up too. I don't see that in Caleb Johnson. I see him just going. So I don't know who I can think of that has, because he doesn't hit the hole with this mean, like the Hulk, like getting through it. He is like a deer, like going through the trees in the forest. He just finds his way. It's so nice to watch. JT?
Yeah, for me, watching the film, it's a little hard because everybody knew he was going to get the ball because they can't pass the ball. So it's like, all right, you give him the bonus that everybody knew he was going to get the ball, and he still was able to succeed and put up really good yards and do all that. But also, his O-line was awesome. So then it starts to give me a little thought. I don't think he's like Blake Corum at all. So let me just say that right off the bat. But it's like the Blake Corum worries for me were his O-line was so great. I'm like, how good is he and how great was his O-line that made him look so good? That's where I'm a little bit on the fence right now on Caleb Johnson, because I watch him. I like what he does. I think he's patient. I think he hits the hole well. But, man, there's a lot of his highlights where it's just like the hole is just massive and he's just running through holes. So I like him. I like him a lot, but that is my worry on some of that when I'm watching that tape and looking at him. And it's like, man, if he gets on a team with a bad O-line, is he like a guy that's going to be just getting mauled in the backfield all the time? And obviously you could say that about any guy in the draft, any of these running backs, if they get on a team with a bad O-line, is never helpful. But I can't decide on him. He's probably my least, the guy I least have a super strong feeling about whether I really like him or whether I kind of want to pass on him. I'm kind of neutral on him at the moment. It really is going to depend on landing spot for him. Because he's anywhere, honestly, for me, he's anywhere from RB5 for me to RB10, depending on where he probably ends up landing. Because there's a couple guys I like their games more, but man, if he ends up in a better spot, I could see myself drafting him over them.
If he ends up as the Pittsburgh Steelers workhorse in the second round, pick 50, whatever they have. I mean, that's like automatic first round pick in Dynasty rookie drafts, right?
For me, I'm a Steelers fan, so I'd be all over that because I think he easily can do the Najee role. I mean, I think Najee's highly underrated. I think he's a better player than he gets credit for, but we know that guy's going to get carries, and we know that Jaylen Warren's not going to be the full-time guy. So if he goes in the second round of the Steelers, to me, he's got to be end of the first round, beginning of the second round in your fantasy drafts because they're going to give him the ball. He's going to get a ton of playing time. Same thing as like if he went to like the Chargers, I'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah. Now all of a sudden I like him a whole lot more than if he goes somewhere else. So that is going to be a little bit different for me on just kind of how that hits. But yeah, I honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up being my RB2 in some circumstances, or if he drops to like RB6 or 7 for me, depending on where he goes and where he gets drafted. I mean, because again, if he doesn't get taken to like say the third round and Devin Neal gets taken in the third round too, I'm like, I kind of like Devin Neal a lot. So I'm like, I would maybe lean to taking Devin Neal over him if they're going to get about the same draft capital. But again, right here, staying right now, I just not sure how I feel about him 100%.
Alan, if Devin Neal goes to Minnesota and Kaleb Johnson goes to Denver, which one do you like better?
I mean, I love the Denver thing, right? I mean, you're talking about Denver in pick 50, whatever it is, 51,
sure.
50, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like that too. But you're making a good point. Isn't Minnesota thinking about bringing back Aaron Jones too? And
yes, 100%. But he's getting older. You can see he kind of broke down a little bit last year. He's not the same player he was. He's still very, very, very good. But I mean,
that's a good player. Right, but that's a good player. Whereas Javonte is going to presumably be gone, and then everyone else there is just like a role player. So
that's why holding spots. Yeah,
like you said, the Chargers in a mock I'm looking at right now, the Chargers are taking Ibuka in the first round, right, which makes sense just to take a receiver, and then they take an edge player in the second and the third. They have him mocked Cam Scatterbo. So it's that could very easily, like I said, these mocks, it could easily be Kaleb Johnson. It could easily be Devin Neal. So,
I like Devin Neal, the Vikings. If he goes to the Vikings, I feel like he's kind of an Aaron Jones type of player. I kind of like that, in that he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he catches, he does a little bit of everything. And he does it all pretty well. So that would be a spot I would really like for him as well in there. I said, it's going to be interesting to see where these guys go because I have so many guys so close together right now in my rankings, and they're like literally like little things are why I prefer one guy over the other barely. It could easily change pretty heavily once we actually see the draft.
Yep. I could see someone like Ollie Gordon or one of those like big, like the 225ers going to Minnesota, I mean, to complement Aaron Jones, sometimes with running backs, they do in the same thing with receivers, right? They get complementary pieces. They would get a slot. They have an X, they have an alpha, all those different things. So yeah, I mean, what do you think about the same question that you posed to me about the Denver running back? Do you think that like the zone scheme stuff that Kaleb likes to run, I mean, does that fit with what Sean Payton does in your opinion?
If you watch the film on that in Iowa, like they call it zone blocking, but I mean, you have there's guards pulling, there's you could see when I see butts to the ball, I see gap blocking. Okay, when I see everybody going one way and maybe one person like kind of opposite direction, kind of chipping off a backside defender. When I see splitting between the guard center, between the guard tackle, when I see guys going opposite ways, that's gap. That's not zone. Like, he's getting these like a lot of like, I guess it's like a gap zone kind of like how do you call it, like a hybrid kind of offense. And it's tailor made for that offense. It's nothing. I played offensive line my entire life, so I just see these offensive line schemes, and I'm like, everybody's like, oh, he's so used to the zone scheme, or he's so used to the this zone blocking. It's not just zone blocking. They have like a hybrid kind of offensive line system for that offense, and I love it. It's super cool to watch everything unfold. But I don't know where he'd go. Like when you said earlier, Pittsburgh does not have a good offensive line. I don't think Kaleb Johnson would fit. I mean, he would look great in the same color scheme, dropping it with the black and the yellow uniform. In your head, it's visually to like absorb that. But if he gets hit behind the line of scrimmage, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I don't see him a very good fit in Pittsburgh.
Right. So what you're saying is you think that he's not good enough to overcome an average or below average offensive line. Like he needs something that's at least the 14th ranked offensive line, something like that, right? Where it's a little bit above average.
I don't want to jump right into the negatives right away, but I'll put it this way. Okay. I watch all the 22 film on Kaleb Johnson. He breaks every arm tackle known to man. People got an arm on his hips. People got an arm on his shoulder pads. People got an arm on his ankle. He breaks every one of those arm tackles. He's 220 some pounds, as far as that goes.
225.
But
yeah.
I tell you what, every time somebody has good contact with him, he goes down on the first tackle, and that scares me a little bit. He's not a guy that breaks tackles a lot. You can see him downfield, kind of like somebody's trying. How defenders they'll try to stand the running back up and try to go for the ball until help arrives, until the defense swarms at the ball later. Yeah. He breaks those kind of tackles. But when it's a direct hit and somebody gets their arms around his waist, he does not get away from one-on-one tackles, and that scares me. So getting hit behind the line of scrimmage by an NFL linebacker, on stuffing the line, stuffing the gaps, that scares me that he's not going to be able to produce anything. Like Omarion Hampton, who puts his head down and gets 2 extra yards, 3 extra yards. No matter where he's hit, he's getting positive yardage. Kaleb Johnson, yes, he falls forward, but he doesn't have that dog in him to get the extra yard kind of thing,
Yeah, those guys could end up going back to back in the real NFL draft, right? Denver, Pittsburgh, boom, boom, just like that. So, in the second round. Do you
No, not Kaleb to the Bears. Who's
Kaleb to the Bears? He's like, what?
One Kaleb there is enough, right?
All right.
So you mentioned a stat I wanted to ask you about, because I have a lot of skepticism about broken tackle rate. You didn't actually identify it by name, but do you think that broken tackle rate is more on the runner, or is it just like bad tackling?
I mean, it's a college level. It's not the professionals. There's a lot of average players on pretty good college teams.
Right.
I'm not saying that bad tackling is a thing, but I think when a running back, here's the thing about Kaleb Johnson. He's such a fast from the backfield to the hole kind of guy that defenders don't have time to sink in and get. He's already with them in the second line of defense on the defense. He's already in the secondary before they know it, and they can't react. They can't get a good hit because he's so fast to the hole. By the time they see him, that's all they can get is a hand on him. So it's not bad tackling. It's just that the offensive line works so well. He gets to the hole so fast. He's already in the linebacker and in the second tier of the defense before they know it, and they can't get a good hit on him. I love that about him. I love that he hits the hole so fast with just, not with power, but just, he's like a deer, like I said, like a deer in the woods kind of thing. I love that about him, that he's so shifty and fast to the hole. So
he doesn't look fast, right? But maybe it's because of the upright style, like you said, because it looks like a giraffe.
He's not quite like Eric Dickerson, like right. Running straight up kind of thing like that. But he does run up straight, and those he's going to get hit one time by a safety or a blitzing linebacker going through the hole, which I haven't seen really him take really solid hits. Minus wrap up hits when somebody got good tackle square up on him. He's going to get hit real hard one time, real high, and he's going to.
You there? Did he freeze up?
He might. Oh, there you go, John. You're back. I was gonna say, just kind of like watching him run a little bit. I think he's way better, so I don't want to make this exact comparison. But I'm nervous at the next level. He reminded me a little bit of Zach Charbonnet.
That's my comp.
Michigan. Okay, so but he kind of reminded me of him, and I was like, and I didn't love Charbonnet coming out. And I'll have to be honest, I didn't love him. He wasn't a guy I was looking to draft in many positions. He's been okay when he's got the full-time role for the Seahawks, but he's kind of been stuck behind Kenny Walker. And I guess that is where my concern comes for Johnson, is I'm like, man, unless he's on a clear-cut team that's really good and he's the clear-cut number one guy, my nervousness is he going to be Charbonnet, where you're going to you'll get some production out of him, but you're going to be real pissed if he was your first-round pick in fantasy when you realize he's going to give you 2 or 3 pretty good games for the rest of the year, and then he's going to give you very numbers, the rest of the time.
it has to be a clear runway for him. It's like, oh wait, Jalen Warren's out this week, so fire up Caleb, put him in. Everyone's gonna have him at RB 13 or 11 or whatever it is for the week. All the consensus rankings. The only reason I held back on the Charbonnet comparison, and by the way, you've given me now the confidence to say this, right? Because Charbonnet, that last year of college, we talked about Kaleb Johnson with 22 receptions. The 44 receptions is like elite level, right? Like that's like a tier below Bucky Irving from the previous year in college football. So that's why I was like, you know, did Charbonnet guys run a lot of routes in college, whereas like, you know, Caleb's more of the dump off guy, or was Charbonnet the same way at UCLA?
The UCLA didn't have a great receiving core those years, so he was getting a lot of dump offs out of the backfield. It wasn't you know, I always make this comparison. People are asking about running backs in this class. If you look at like LaQuint Allen State for Syracuse, like he lined up as a wide receiver and in the slot and motion out of the backfield and ran a ton of patterns. He wasn't a guy who was just like slipping out of the backfield and just drop offs. That's kind of what Sharps did at UCLA. He wasn't running a ton of patterns for them. He kind of was the guy that was sliding out of the backfield and like, hey, if I didn't have my guy, my first read, I was just dumping it off to him out of the backfield kind of deal. Where some of these guys, like a Bucky Irving, they were running patterns for him. They were running plays for him. They were trying to move him around and get him the ball. And Johnson, would more of his stuff was definitely drop-offs just because they couldn't get the ball downfield.
Yeah, I saw McNamara. McNamara was dumping off a ton of just dump-offs, like kind of when everything fell apart on a passing zone. Yeah, absolutely.
John, where would you put Caleb if he would have if he was eligible last year with all the Jonathan Brooks and Trey Bensons and Corums? Where would you have had him ranked in that crew?
I can't tell you how many drafts I reached to get Johnson, and the, you know, it's so Johnson. It's so bad. Of all the Brooks, shares I have now that I'm just stuck with for another year with absolutely zero production whatsoever. I think Brooks would probably still be my number one. Johnson would be behind him for sure. Trey Benson would probably be number 3 as far as that goes. But it would. I just feel so bad for Jonathan Brooks.
Isn't there a way to get out of Jonathan Brooks, though, in your dynasty?
No, you know what you do? You trade for Jonathan Brooks in like 5 leagues, and you get stuck with him like I did.
I traded Bucky Irvin in the playoffs this last year. I traded Bucky Irvin to a guy who was trying to win the championship. I got a first, a second, and Jonathan Brooks. And I drafted Jonathan Brooks in that league, traded him away for JT in a multiplayer deal at the beginning of the year, and then I wouldn't trade him back for him because I got a young team. I was like, oh, I can afford to sit him on the bench for a year with the injury. But I think, like you said, good question. I think Kaleb Johnson, like I said, this is funny because I was really high on Trey Benson. He was my number 1 RB in last year's draft. And I actually think Kaleb Johnson's closer to Trey Benson for me. And that's weird for me to say because I love Trey Benson and I'm not really in on Johnson right now, but I like Johnson a lot more than the guys around. I mean, I was a big Ray Davis guy. John knows I'm a big Ray Davis guy, and I think he's clearly ahead of Ray Davis. So, and I was like,
that worked
Ray
out,
Davis,
though.
Marshawn Lloyd, all those guys were kind of together for me. So I think he was in that group. So I think he, you know, some people have him as RB2 or RB3 in this class. I think he's closer to RB6 for me, to be honest with you.
But I
Caleb,
think he would have
been, Caleb. But I think Caleb would have been probably almost RB1 or 2 for me last year. He probably would have been RB2 for me, slightly behind Benson. I still like Benson, but I also said last year, if you're taking Benson, expecting him to give you fantasy production his rookie year, then don't do it. If you can wait on him, take him. And I still think he's going to be good, but I thought it would take him at least a year in the league before he did anything. So I'm kind of in that camp, I guess.
I just traded. I gave away Bucky Irving and we do a draft lottery. A draft lottery pick would end up being 104 in our draft lottery to get Jonathan Brooks right when he came back before he got hurt again. I was like, yes, I'm going all in on Brooks. And man, talk about just getting, I mean, that was the biggest pee-pee slap in the world that I ever got in my life when that happened. So
what are you hoping? I mean, what do you think Brooks is worth? He's a hold for you though. And I know we're talking about Kaleb Johnson today, but I just think that there's a lot of people sitting there that have pick 111 that have Jonathan Brooks. We're talking about, you know, I mean, you couldn't just swap him for Caleb right now. I mean, right? That's no way. No one's going to want Brooks. He's like completely damaged goods at this point.
I'm trading for Brooks still in all these leagues now because he's worth nothing. And people are going to say like, hey, I'm not going to be able to play this guy. And especially if you only have like 2 or 3 IR spots, you're not going to
No.
You're not going to have like Trevor Lawrence and Dak Prescott sitting on your thing and Jonathan Brooks in your active roster kind of thing. I have 10 IR spots, so I'm okay in most of my leagues to be able to weather this storm. I'll put it that way. But man, people who have short IR spots or no IR spots at all, they're looking to get rid of guys like him who will not play the entire season. So I'll buy him for probably, if I can get a mid third or late third round pick for Brooks right now, you better believe I'm making that happen.
You would take 304.
I was going to say, I think a 3 is probably fair. If somebody's holding a little bit more, then I've been getting him more in package deals, whereas like a couple players and picks kind of combined or swapped is kind of where I've been. If I'm acquiring Brooks, that's where I've been getting him, isn't like a multiplayer or probably. I just think a third is fair. There's going to be some people who are like, oh man, I picked him in the first round. I really don't want to take
less
than a second for him.
That's yesterday's price, man.
Yeah. So, but I think, if you did give up a second, I think it's got to be late. I think you got to think 210 to 212. Or you just got to be a third rounder for him. If you're just going straight up Brooks for a pick, I think. And so here's my thing is, I like Brooks, so I wouldn't mind getting him for that. But I also really think this is a pretty deep class of a lot of guys I like. So I want that early third. If I can get an early third, if I have Brooks, I might be willing to drop him for an early third, especially during the draft. If there's a couple, 1 or 2 guys I have my eye on and they're falling, I could definitely see myself going, you could have them and see what happens. I'll take this other guy. I'll take this other running back at 3-1 and do something like that.
Yeah. As we're talking about Caleb though, guys, like, do you think Caleb, if somebody is hot on him and you're sitting there at 111, at 112, is there a veteran cash out? Like whether you have to add something to him, are we neutral on him enough where, well, John, you said you have him as RB3, so that's something, but can we get Derrick Henry on our team? A 31-year-old Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey. Can we add one of these guys? Can we add a first-round pick? What do we want to do with Caleb if we don't think he needs all these perfect conditions? That's really what I'm thinking right here.
So am I in tier 1, which is like the worst 3 teams in the league, or am I in worst 4 teams in the league, or tier 2, which is right in the middle of the league, or am I in the fourth kind of mode?
You're a perennial contender. You're like in the 4 or 5 best team. You're in that top 5 of your league, but you're a contender. You feel like you can do it.
If I trust my team that much, where I would need them. If I'm in the playoffs, I'm a contender. If I even make the playoffs, I'm a contender.
Yes.
In
I'm
league,
so happy you said that.
So
happy you said that.
If I make the play, I want Derrick Henry more than I want Caleb Johnson right now, because I'm not sure of Caleb Johnson's role. I will do whatever I can to get Derrick Henry in there for 1 more year to get myself in the playoffs. Because if I win my league, I just won 7 more years of free fantasy football for the league I'm in, because I won the championship. So
I like how
I want to win now.
Yeah. So because I think you can do that with these guys, right? Because how many times, like I was with you, I was like, oh, Trey Benson, he ran a great 40 time, and everyone was like impressed. He was fast. It was, and then you come back to this year, it's like we're doing it again. Now, one of these guys, right? It's a deep class. You hear that a lot, right? Meaning, like, of course, one of these guys is going to end up in a situation, and he's going to be the new Bucky Irving. No, you could have gotten Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy at any point of your draft last year, right? Like there's no one that was reaching up into the early second round to take those 2 running backs. Right. You were like, all right, 3rd round, I'll take Bucky. Sure. Whatever. So someone is going to bust out, but like, isn't betting against that, unless he's a workhorse or something like that, like the way to do it?
I like a lot of guys in this draft, so I want a few more swings at it, because you're going to miss. It's just there's going to be some misses. So if I could get somebody that had like an early second and maybe a mid second, and I could trade Caleb at like 111, I would consider it. If I could get like 2-2 and 2-5 for like the 111. And
that's a hard trade to make, though.
It's a tough one,
especially in the leagues you guys play in, because you guys bring in a lot of sharp players and stuff like that.
If I could get that, because I want two swings at running backs in the second round, I would do it. I'll tell you a trade I made this year, and I had to fight the guy for it because he didn't want to do it. But I made a move where I got rid of James Conner. And I was just, my team was falling apart. So I was like, I'm trading older guys, trying to get younger. And I got Pacheco in a big trade where I traded multiple players away and got players back. I traded away DeAndre Swift and got Pacheco back with some wide receivers and a few moves. So I went and traded Pacheco, and I was like, I got to give me 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds. And eventually I got a second and a second and third round swap. So I was able to, technically I was able to get a second, and then I traded a gave him my third for his second. I moved up a round. So for me, I was like, oh, that's worth it to me. I'm not a huge Pacheco guy. I think they're going to draft a running back anyway. So I was looking to make that move. So I'm trying to make as many moves as I can, especially if my team's a little bit younger or building. I want to try to get a couple second rounders because I just want to take a swing on a few of these guys in that middle of that second round.
Fellas, what's up? Peter Nova from Fantasy Faceoff, my boy. So let's just say, okay, I'm gonna ask you guys this question. I'm going to entertain Hoob's thing here. Caleb goes to the Bears, okay? And at the same time, we're going to talk about what happens if Travion Henderson is the winner here and he goes to Denver, as far as that goes. Then what do you do?
Well, Travion Henderson could easily be the RB2, right?
Easily.
He would be. He
is
the
my
RB2.
Right. He's like RB2, RB3 for me. Him and Hampton are right next to each other. I think Hampton's more of a workhorse back. I do like Henderson in that I think he's got big playability and I like his receiving profile. So depending on where he goes, but I definitely would take both those guys over Kaleb Johnson. I know not everybody's in that boat. But for me, just from what I've seen on tape and what I like about those guys, I feel a little bit better about those guys right now. But my mind could be changed. If Kaleb Johnson goes to the combine and looks awesome, maybe he swings me. But
Alan,
right now I like those two guys.
Are you going to the combine?
I'm not going to the combine. Are you guys going?
Yeah, we're going. We'll be.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I told you I went down to the Super Bowl for that week, and we had a great time there. And I got to pick and choose my asks at home.
All right, so let's get back to Kaleb Johnson real fast. We talked about some positives. Is there any negatives that you saw? Okay, I saw it. I kind of excuse me. I'm a little bit sick myself. I think it's going around, but I kind of explained some of the negatives I saw about he can't really break tackles when he got any negatives, Alan, that you could see that you could kind of point out, and then JT after that, you could chime in also. But sure. What do you see as far as more an analytics guy? What am I missing on Kaleb Johnson? What makes him not your RB2 like he is mine?
So he is your RB2. I like that. Oh, didn't you say Hampton was your RB2? Or you?
I mean 3. I'm sorry. I'm
3. Okay. Yeah, I just think that you watch him and there's good things, but it's not like he doesn't jump off the page, right? Like no one's saying Kaleb Johnson can make his way up into the top of the second round, right? How there was that with Breece Hall in past years. And also, I think you guys did a great job of outlining he needs a specific set of circumstances where it's a plus offensive line. And that he needs you said you didn't think he needed a zone scheme, right? And also it's the running style, although it doesn't concern you guys, seems like it could open him up to some big hits here. I just think that, again, I don't look at him and say oh my God, this is just pluck generic good running back in here who's produced in a big time college. And, it's just, I'm expecting a better version than the production I get from Brian Robinson, where I'm able to start him every week, but it's not special. That's why he's going to go at pick 111 in your drafts. He's not going to go at 106, but if he ends up being, the Chargers running back, like you said before. So overall, though, and also the pass blocking, I've read, I didn't really see him doing a lot of pass blocking on any video that I watched, but it didn't seem like that he was sticking people and pancaking them. And so that's a way to not get on the field, right? If you can be a plus pass blocker, they're going to trust you, and especially as a rookie.
There are too many running backs that actually pancake defenders. It's their job is to get in the way and just hold him from checking the quarterback for a minute. Yeah, chip off for a screen pass or just kind of make good contact to slow a defender down into the quarterback and get the pass off. But I love when people say that. I didn't see him pancaking.
Well, you know what I'm saying, because that's from our era, John, where the running backs actually stepped up and
that's what fullbacks are for.
Right. Well, they stuck their helmet in the chin of these monster linebackers. Who was the best ever at that, you think? That was also a good, productive runner.
Larry Centers.
That's a good one.
From the Arizona Cardinals. He's my favorite fullback running back there ever was, as far as all around, just a boom, boom, boom. Kyle Juszczyk's pretty good at that kind of stuff too, but Larry Centers from the Cardinals was my favorite all around, blocking fullback kind of running back, catching out of the backfield, all around. Walter Payton was good at it too. There's a lot of guys who were.
Peyton was a highly underrated blocker. There's some clips where he sticks some guys on pass plays. He was a highly underrated blocker. I was gonna say Jerome Bettis was another guy that was a pretty good blocker / runner.
And Saquon's good at it too. Saquon's an all around back who blocks pretty well too. So, but Larry Centers instantaneously comes to my head as the best, blocking running back.
So I would say that's the biggest thing is like, he doesn't stand out as like someone who's going to push everyone out on the way and earn the trust of the team as a blocker. But maybe you saw something different. You said you watched all of his all 22. What did you see from the pass blocking, John?
I saw him get in the way sometimes. A lot of times he played spectator, which I like to call, like if you're not, not so much the Olay blocks, but when things are going downfield, he's watching somebody else with the ball in their hand instead of like, it drives me absolutely nuts as an offensive lineman to watch guys who when it's their time to hold the ball, they expect the whole team to block for them and give them the hole and all. And when the ball's not in their hand, they're just watching the play like they're in the stands of popcorn, like they're a spectator, like. You got to find somebody that's on the opposite side of the field that's coming to the ball, that's got an angle. Get it in somebody's way. Do something. Don't just stand there and watch the play. He blocks coming in the back. I've seen him like take on some linebackers, some defensive ends, kind of help out in chipping and stuff like that, and just stop players. So, but I didn't pass that much. There was a lot of running going on, so it wasn't too much it wasn't necessary for him to pass block as much as like some other running backs do in a high pass volume offense.
It's going to be necessary in the NFL. I mean, that's literally how you get on the field.
Yes. JT, any negatives for you now? Like, what do you see?
Well, I tell you what, this one's going to be a big one come combine is how fast is he actually? I've seen stuff where people think he's going to run a 4.6. And I've seen people think that's crazy. They're like, there's no way he's closer to a 4.45 guy. He's one of those, like, you see him on tape run away from some people at times, but he doesn't look super fast on tape. So it's like, I don't know if it's because he's just a bigger player in the way he runs. Because, sometimes some guys get the ball and you're like, whoa, there he goes. He's never that guy that you see like, oh, he's just blowing it. But like, he doesn't seem to get caught a lot, even though it's like, doesn't seem like he's running super fast. So that's going to be real interesting to see if he's closer to like a 4.45 at 6 foot 225. I think people are going to be real fired up about it. If he ends up being closer to like a 4.6, not to say he can't play at that, because we've seen plenty of guys be successful in the NFL that didn't run 4.4s, but it also changes what you think about what he can do long term. And again, if he is kind of more that 4.56 guy or 4.6 guy, Najee's faster than that, and people complain about him all the time. So it's so that's one of the things is like, is he going to be more of a plotter in the league? Now, the benefit I think for him over some of these other guys is a lot of guys consistently are trying to rely on their speed to get the outside. They're always wanting to break the outside, always looking to bounce. He doesn't. He had a ton of his production in between the guards. A ton of his production was up the middle. So, and then when they did run wide, he was pretty good about being patient and waiting for the hole and then finding it and kicking it up, as opposed to some of these guys, you see them because they are fast. They outrun their blocks on the outside run plays. They don't wait for them to set them up and then use it. They just try to outrun everybody to the corner. I thought he did a pretty good job of that. So I did like the patience. That did kind of remind me a little of a Le'Veon Bell, where he kind of let the O-line guys figure out their way, which is why if he's on a team with a good O-line, he's shown he knows how to use his O-line to his benefit, which I think is important, as we've seen other guys who don't do that. I think Donovan Edwards is that guy from Michigan that everybody complains about, because you're like, you have a great O-line. Why are you always running into him all the time? He's a guy that doesn't show that patience and waits the flow, So I think there's a lot of things to like about Kaleb Johnson. I'm just, like I said, he's one of the guys I'm just not 100% sure about, because he was super productive in college, which I love, and he was good as a freshman, which I love. But it's like, man, his O-line was so good for him. Is he a guy that has enough talent to outplay his O-line if his O-line's bad? If he gets on one of the worst O-lines in the league, he gets on that team, does he have enough to not be a guy that carries the ball and averages 3.5 yards a carry, because he just is screwed when he's getting contacted immediately, because he doesn't know how to play that way, because he's not used to getting hit right away.
I can't believe you brought Donovan Edwards into a Kaleb Johnson conversation.
He's the first guy that popped in my mind on this class that people always rip him for his vision. He's not, he doesn't wait. He doesn't find the hole. He just kind of runs in there. So I do think he's patient, which I like. And I do like the fact that, he is a big guy and he used his body to his size, like making plays up the middle. Cause that's the other thing you don't want to see. You don't want to see a guy that's a bigger back, but then he tries to play like a small back. He's playing like a scat back, even though he is 225. I think he does play his size, which I like.
Yeah. All right. So what we're looking at here now is where are we projecting these guys to go? A, in the NFL draft, B, in fantasy football drafts, and C, what team do you want them to go to? So that's kind of a 3-part question here because this is all interchangeable. When we talk about this stuff right now, there's so many. It's like we got a Lego set and we've only got the first row built. We don't know what the rest of the thing is. We don't have everything all set up yet. It's going to be hard to project this stuff without having, you just have directions. You don't have after you put piece C, Z, blah, blah together. We don't have draft capital. We don't have team landing spot. We don't have any of the 40 times. We don't have any of the drills, the cone drills, anything like that. So as of right now, we're just gonna go in la la land here and pretend that he went somewhere decent. Okay, so if he goes somewhere decent, where do you think he's going to go in the NFL draft? And then if he goes somewhere decent, fantasy football drafts, where would he go? And what team would make that all happen?
Right. Let's say, for example, like he goes 68th to the Raiders, right? Like that's like, oh, okay, that's the top of the third round. It's a little lower than, him being 50th to the Steelers. We've talked about that a number of times, but
Amari Hampton's going to the Raiders. Stop that.
Oh, that's where you want him to go.
That's where I want him to go so bad.
Yeah. Well, what number do they pick? Oh, they pick 37. They'd have to do it there. Yeesh, yes. That's a little early.
He is the Josh Jacobs one-on-one replacement. That's the way I look at that.
Josh Jacobs, he's been, well, that's right. Who did they use this year? They used Amir Abdullah.
They used a whole bunch of nobodies.
Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah, White.
So let's say he goes for
McCormick.
I'm going to say, right. I'm going to stick with that. I think this guy's got Steelers written all over him at 52. Like it just seems, now, or again, if he drops a little bit to 68th to the Raiders would be my second guess. And I would say that he settles in. If he's going to be the lead runner, like a 1-2 punch with Jalen Warren and the Steelers, or basically the chance to ascend as a workhorse in the Raiders scheme, I would say that puts him right around 110 to 202, right? Depending on if, like, let's say Jackson Dart in a Superflex league lands in a spot where he's probably going to start by week 5, like you guys play Superflex, you cannot pass on a quarterback. I mean, I guess you can, but the people that passed on Bo Nix and Michael Penix are not happy right now, right? Like they took, So I would say that he's going to go 110 if it's the nut spot, probably 202 to 203 if it's something that the market doesn't like.
JT,
I'm really interested to see, we've seen running backs kind of get pushed down the last couple of years, but we're seeing a little more of a running back resurgence, which I love. But the question is going to be, are teams going to make sure they get their guy? Is there a guy they're like, we really prefer this guy over the next guy, and so they draft him earlier? Or are we going to see the opposite effect where people are like, these guys are pretty close for me too. I like 4 guys. Let's just take another position and see what guy drops to us at our next pick. So that's going to be interesting to see if we actually see these teams go up to get their guy, go up and get a guy in the second round, as opposed to waiting till the 3rd or 4th round. Because we saw last year, a lot of 3rd round guys started to kind of go off, and then it tailed off, and then it was late guys late. I think Kaleb Johnson could be a second. The Steelers, he feels like a Steelers type of player to me. Him, Hampton, even GT, if you actually got to him in the first round, I could see them going. Like all 3 of these guys feel more like Steelers picks. I like Travian Henderson a lot. I just have a hard time seeing the Steelers go him because of Warren. I just think him and Warren he's a better Warren. Like, I think they want a bigger player to replace him. So that's why and if they don't go those guys, I can see them waiting and taking like a Judkins in like the 3rd or 4th round.
Yes.
If they decide they're going to wait, or even an Ollie Gordon. If Ollie Gordon plays pretty well, they're like, dude, we can get Ollie Gordon in the 4th. I can see them waiting till then. So I can see a lot of those scenarios that's going. To me, I really think late 2nd, early 3rd is where he's going to go. To me, it's going to be one of those teams at the top of the draft. If they go QB or need a wide receiver, where they go early, and then do they say, hey, do we think we can wait? If they're drafting at the top of the 2nd round, they go, hey, only 1 guy's off the board. Let's wait till the 3rd and get one of these other running backs and then take another position they might think is a little more scarce, or maybe these teams like the Steelers that want defensive tackle, would they go, I like that defensive tackle more than I like this running back. Let's go D-tackle and see who gets to us in the next round. So I think some of these guys, even though I think they have the late first round, early second round talent, I think there's a good chance some of these guys drop. I mean, I couldn't believe Jonathan Taylor went as late as he did in the drafts of the Colts when he got drafted. I was just like, wow, I can't believe Jonathan Taylor's falling. And again, it's like, the Colts came back up to get him whatever that was, early to mid second round.
Yeah, early second round, something like
that. So I definitely think that's a position where you can see maybe Hampton, maybe GT is only guy in the first round, and maybe then you see some of these guys in the second.
People are going to be
thinking
surprised.
Late second, early third. That's just where I think, especially if you're a team like the Chargers. Here's my reasoning. If you're the team like the Chargers or the Steelers who need running back, but you also need wide receiver, I feel like there's like a lot less wide receivers I love, where there's a lot more running backs I like, where I'm going to go get the wideout I want earlier because I'm just not sure who's going to be there later. And then I know that there's going to be 3 or 4 running backs that are still going to be available. So I really think I could see like Chargers, Steelers, Raiders, those guys going and getting wideouts in the first round or beginning of the second round, and then maybe waiting to see who's left over in the third or fourth round.
Game theory stuff's important. Yeah, definitely the game theory stuff, right? And it seems like that, right, John? That like a lot of these running backs from 2 to 7. I mean, you could everyone's going to have like a different order, more or less. Henderson could be 7 or it could be 2, depending.
I think people are going to be surprised when all these NFL teams are bolstering their defense and bolstering their offensive line and bolstering all these non-fantasy football players are being drafted in the first couple of rounds, because you don't have to reach for a running back this year. You could take your time and fill up the rest of your roster with your more important needs, and then pick up any of these running backs that are later in the draft. As far as that goes, I mean, you can get Devin Neal in round 4. Cam Scadaboo in round 4. You can get.
I think Scadaboo is going to get it pushed up. By the way, I think he's going to end up being higher than you think. I think people are going to like him.
You can get Damian Martinez in round 5 or something like that. I mean, there's guys out there.
That's like if the Steelers waited and they went on like a Damian Martinez in like the 5th round, I would be stoked for that because I like Damian Martinez. So like he would be like, oh, I'm picking him in the beginning of the second round then if I've got to pick beginning to mid round. So I think we're going to see a regret for fantasy football. People aren't going to like it, but we see those years that are high offensive or high defense. We're on a defensive year. This is a defensive year for the NFL draft. Right. Everybody went offense early last year. Everybody. I mean, we didn't see a defensive player picked to 14 or 15 to the Colts when they tagged Latu. Like, I think we're just going to see the opposite this year. I think we're going to see a ton of defense early and often, and then guys are going to get their guys in the 3rd, 4th round. Is how we'll get this wideout, we'll get this running back, but people are going to want to go out and get that cornerback, that defensive lineman, the D tackle, the D end. I just think this is a real deep class of those. I just think guys are going to really want the guys that fit their scheme defensively more than the offensive guys. I think that's where I think we're going to see a lot of offense guys push out. But I also think that means you're going to see a lot of guys that are 3rd, 4th round picks that end up being like early 2nd round picks for fantasy or mid 2nd round picks for fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Said it all.
All right. We could talk about this all day long. I'd love to keep you here for another 2 hours, Alan. This is a great conversation, and I can go off on 1,000 tangents with this year's draft.
Well, we do. We always do when I come to you guys, right? We start talking about Kaleb Johnson, and we end up talking about deals we made for Jonathan Brooks. Like, listen, that's just what we do when we get together, guys. We can't help it. We all love Dynasty Fantasy Football. So
the people that didn't hear in the beginning, where can everybody find you at, Alan?
At Alan Seslowskya. You could put it in the video description if you want on all social media. And I'm over on the RotoWire YouTube page, helping produce all content for different kinds of sports. And then I'll do one quick plug here. RotoWire. If you guys have heard of the VSiN network, it's called the Vegas Sports and Information Network. You have heard of it? Yeah, it's on YouTube TV. It's a digital television network. RotoWire, the company I work for, just landed its own TV show from 2 to 3 on VSiN. It's all sports betting stuff. So we're there Monday through Friday. I'm subbing in here and there. So I do like maybe 1 or 2 shows a month. But Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen are 2 flagship guys. They're there doing all. If you love sports betting and you have YouTube TV or, it's on all the digital platforms. So VSiN Network, RotoWire has a new show called Prop Points.
Definitely worth checking out. I jump on there and I don't make the shows a lot of times right when they happen, but I'm a big jump on the YouTube and I pull up the old shows. Yeah, I'm all over the sports betting shows, so I watch sports betting shows on that all the time. So that's a great spot for people to check shows out. I'll definitely have to check out the RotoWire show for sure.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to plug that. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, JT, where can everybody find you? Because you got like 17 different hats on besides that JT Brew hat. So where can everybody find you in the fantasy football community?
Yeah, just doing shows with you, the rookie spotlights right now. Then on my show, the Stu with JT Brew, we've been trying to do different mock drafts, just different scoring formats to get people, just an idea of where you can start looking at your draft. Where am I picking guys who might be options in that area? So we've been kind of doing those. Been doing those Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights when we can, if we get groups together. So been doing that. And then we're back at it on Fantasy and Frames, our Wednesday night shows that we run through. So Shoot the Gap with me and Jorge. I'm also guesting on Dynasty 365. I'm in there all the time. I'm helping out on that show as well. So on Wednesday nights, so we'll have 2 of those shows tonight. So check us out tonight on Fantasy and Frames. And then if you're a DLF member, writing all kinds of rookie spotlights and articles over there. So check out all of that. And yeah, I think that's it for now.
JT also does the IDP rankings and he's in Devi and all that stuff.
I got the IDP rankings on DLF. I got my Devi rankings. I just put up I had a couple people asking, put up my IDP rookie rankings for this upcoming draft. So guys to kind of keep an eye out in your IDP league, some guys I like. And I did a pre-draft ranking and I'll do a post-draft where I kind of move those guys around depending on where we know they land.
Let's say you're in like an IDP league of, the same formats we play with Superflex, all that stuff, and you only start like 3 or 4 IDPs, right? Like it's just kind of entry level IDP. Is Travis Hunter still does he end up being like a top 3 pick now because of the possibility he gets some wide receiver points?
I think for IDP, he is gonna be that wild card that could just make or break you. If he plays even a decent amount of offense, and you're in an IDP league where they start cornerback, not just DB, but start cornerback, he is going to be a steal. I think he's a top 3 guy. I think you got to take him because you can play a guy that's going to get you wide receiver points on defense, and then also has the ability to get you defensive points. So for IDP purposes, I've been putting that on all my things. I'm like, depending on how much he plays, but I think, who just put it up here, he said, Hunter to New England. If he goes to New England and plays both ways, I'm all in. I'm grabbing Travis Hunter at the top of my drafts because I just think he's a guy that can do both. And the fact is, I was in a college C2C league this year that had IDP, and basically I lost the championship because the guy one of the leagues I didn't have Travis Hunter. The guy I had played Travis Hunter on defense in a kind of a low scoring defensive league. And Travis Hunter had 150 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns, and just basically blew me out of the water by playing that guy on defense. So, yeah, if you're in an IDP league, I think if he plays a significant amount of offense, especially in a start QB league, a little less than a start, just a deep defensive back, but start cornerback, I think you got to take him top 3. I think you got to. I really
agree,
do.
John?
I agree. I think he's going to be playing primarily defense, but he'll be in 4 wide receiver sets on a regular basis when it's in definite passing downs and need like a clutch player. So he's going to get points. I could see 3 receptions a game being almost the norm for a guy like that, just going in a couple plays, So yeah, that's where I'm at. So, but I am John McGlynn, and this is my show, the Dynasty Evaluation, and I bring all these smart and handsome guests on here all the time so that I seem smart because I surround myself with all these smart people and these handsome people. So it brings up the viewership a little bit. But, you guys, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to be part of the Dynasty Evaluation. It means so much for you guys to spend time with me. And JT stuck with me on a regular basis, unfortunately. But, Alan, when you come in here once in a while, we super appreciate you jumping on, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for everything you brought today.
It's one of my favorite shows to do. I just love hanging out with you guys. You guys give good energy, good vibe, and I admire what you do very much.
Well, thank you very much. John McGlynn 75 on X on Fantasy and Frames. Check out Fantasy and Frames for all the goodness from betting to IDP to Keith Fleming's got tons of stuff going on with his betting show too. I mean, there's like 35 people in Fantasy and Frames pumping out articles all the time. Check out the fantasyandframes.com website. And thank you very much, everybody, for being part of the Dynasty Evaluation Show. We will see you later.